Hello everyone, it's Neil here from 3D Tutor, and I am back today with another tutorial. And this one I thought we'd do something a little bit different. I thought we'd create a swimming pool and show you guys how to create that, create the water, and finally I'll show you how to just do a quick render of it. So with that said, let's get started. So first thing we need to do is let's left click and delete the cube, the camera and the light. Then we're going to press Shift A and I'm going to bring in a curve and we're going to bring in a path. So if you just press the tab button, then you will be able to see something. And now what we're going to do is we're going to actually delete all these nodes. So let's shift click all these nodes over here. And we're just going to delete everyone. So press delete and vertices, and you should be left with just one left here. Now press 7 to go over the top on the number pad, and then press E and start extruding out. Now the thing is, when we're extruding out, we can just keep pressing E and bring it round. Just try and make sure though that the distance between here are relatively the same, not too far apart from each other. So let's carry on. And what we're doing here is we're going to create the shape of our swimming pool. So if you do move like this, just press 7 again and go over the top. What that does is, by going over the top, is it keeps it all flat. That's exactly what we want. So 7 again. And now, so create your swimming pool whichever shape you want it. So let's bring it down here, and I'm going to create something. And don't worry about if it's too sharp, we're going to sort that out as well. So I'm just going to create my pool with some nice round edges going round. And we're going to smooth all this out, so it's going to look very smooth when we've got our tiles on as well. And I'm going to bring it, that one, as you can see, is probably a little bit too long. So what I'll do is I'll just press Ctrl Z and just get rid of that. And now I can start bringing it out again. And the reason for this is because we're going to subdivide it, we want them to be relatively the same distance from each other. So when we put another point in each of these, they're going to be relatively the same. And it just makes smoothing it off just so much easier. So I'm going to come back round finally now to the start. And I think I can join these up actually with this distance. So what I'll do is I'll make sure this is selected, shift click this one, press F, and then that will join them up. And now you can press shift space, bring in your move, and now you can just start moving that one in like that. So when you finish, just press A to select everything, come up here and let's subdivide it once. And now I'm looking to see if I've got enough nodes in here to actually make it nice and smooth. I think I'll subdivide it once more, like so. And now you can see I've got loads and loads of nodes, which makes it much easier to work with. And now what we're going to do is we're going to come to control points and we're actually going to start smoothing this out. So let's just click this a few times, and you'll notice every time you click it, the smoothness of this part here, you can see this little sharp edge here, it'll start all smoothing out the more times you actually click it. So let's just smooth it out, I think once more. Let's have a look. And I'm going around it and just checking. There's a bit of an edge here, as you can see, and maybe possibly there. So I think one more will do it. And I think that will be just fine like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the origin of my curve. So I'll press Tab, right click, and set origin to geometry, and that's just going to move it there for us. And then I'm going to press shift space again, put my move tool on, and now I'm just going to move it just a little bit more so it's more centered towards our ground plane. Then I'm going to press shift A, I'm going to bring in a mesh, and I'm going to bring in a cube. Just make sure when you bring in your cube that your cube comes in the center, and to do that just press shift S and you'll put cursor to world origin, and that'll set your cursor right there, and then you can press shift A and bring in your cube. Now if you imagine this first cube is actually your tile, so it needs to be obviously much smaller, and we're going to pull it over to, imagine if this let's say is the edge of the pool, the tiles hang over just very slightly over. So if we now make it smaller on the Z axis, and I'm just trying to work out how actually big I want my tiles. So let's bring it out a little bit, and I think something like that. Obviously they're a little bit too thick, so I'll make them a bit thinner. And now what we'll do is we'll actually mark some seams. So let's press tab button and I'll go underneath it. So click on the face here, press Ctrl plus on the number pad, press Ctrl E, click on mark seams, and then we've just got this seam on top. I don't actually want this seam going round here. So I've clicked on the top face, Ctrl E once again, and click clear seams. And now we just mark a seam on here. So click this face on here, Ctrl E, and mark seam. So if you look at this now, you've basically got seams going around the bottom plane face of this. You've got seams going across this face, and then you've got seams coming up these edges, these two edges here. And the reason for that is because we're going to make a piece of concrete basically in between each tile, just to make it look a bit more realistic. And now what we're going to do is we're going to come up to vert select, and we're going to hover over here, press the L button and select everything. And now I'm going to press Shift D, enter, press Shift Space if your move tool's not there. That'll bring your gizmo back, pull it over, and basically you want to set this far enough distance where you're happy with the size of the concrete in between. So that looks a little bit big. And now what I can do is I can come to face select, select this face and this face, press right click, and we're going to bridge faces like so. Then we're going to hover over here, press Ctrl R, press 2, and that'll give us 2 edge loops. Left click and right click, and then press the S button, and that's going to make these a bit smaller. Press the SZ button, and that'll bring them down as well. And then you should notice you've got a nice difference. I think that's actually pulled in a little bit too much, so let me just pull it out with SY. Just like that, and it needs to be a nice gradual slope as concrete would be. And now finally I'm going to use this tile here, so I'm going to bring this into place. I'm going to bring it on a relatively flat part of the curve going round, one that's more in line with my tile. So I'm going to bring it just to here, and I'm also checking how much overhang I've got, although we can change that as we go on, as you'll see. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Tab button, and I'm going to come into face select. I'm going to Alt Shift and select all these faces, select this face as well, and just press delete faces. And now we're just left with this. Now what we need to do is just tidy this up with a couple more seams. So let's put a seam on top of here and a seam underneath, just to make sure that this can unwrap well. So seam on the bottom there where no one can see it. Then press Ctrl E and mark C. And now what we want to do is we want to unwrap it, but the first thing we'll do is we'll add a face on here. So let's come to our verts again, click on these verts here, press the F button, and that'll add a face on there. And that's just in case you can see between the tiles, you just want a face on there so it looks realistic. So finally what we need to do now is press Tab button, Ctrl A, rotation and scale, and now let's come to our UV editing. And when you unwrap this, first of all, so when I grab it all like that, you'll see it's unwrapped like that, which is not correct. Press U now and unwrap, and this is why we set the rotation and scale so it actually unwraps correctly, something like that. Now finally let's go back to modeling, and we can press Tab now, come over to the little spanner, add modifier, and we'll add an array, and you'll get an array come in right there. We don't need to actually change any of these because this is why we made this piece of tile, so they fit together very nicely. So now let's put this up, and you'll end up with something like this, hopefully. And now what we need to do is we need to make sure the orientation of this is set to the orientation of our path. So click on your path, and the orientation is set here, as you can see. It doesn't matter if it's over here or over here, it makes no difference. Press Shift S, and we're going to put cursor to selected, which is going to put our cursor there. And then click on your tiles and press right click, set origin to 3D cursor. Now the origin of the tiles is set exactly the same as the origin of the path, and now we can actually add our second modifier on our tiles. So again, come over to the spanner, click on add modifier, and now what you're going to do is you're going to add a curve modifier. Under object, we're going to actually click on Nerve's path, and you're going to end up with something like this. And this is all this needs doing now is basically moving out to follow this circle, as you'll see. So let's press Shift Space, click on the Move tool. Now this can be a little bit tricky. What we need to do is we need to get this to line up somewhere around our circle. So it's just a bit of playing around. So I'm going to pull it that way, and you'll see now it's starting to line up. Now this is going to be the sides of the pull basically going down. So we need the tiles to come over just very slightly, as they would do in a pull, to make it look realistic. So I'm just going to put it around about there, and I think also I will just lift them up just a little bit so I can see what I'm doing at the moment. And now all you need to do is you need to start adding more on the array mesh, and you'll notice that it actually starts following the curve around and making some tiles going all the way around. Now as we go along, these probably won't fit up perfectly. You can see they're a little bit out like that. So if I put it back down one on here, but first of all, let's now go back to our tiles and press tab button. And what we're going to do is, first of all, before we do anything with these, we're going to give them two materials. The reason why we're doing it now is it's going to be a real pain trying to give all these two materials when we've actually applied our modifiers. So let's come to this part first. This part is our concrete. Go to face select and we'll select this part here. Come over to materials and we're going to add in two materials. So let's do two. First one, we'll click new and we'll call this concrete. And the second one we will call new again, and we'll call this tile. So we'll call it top tile. And then we know which one that is, just like that. And now we'll apply the concrete to this part here. So click assign. And then we're going to actually come to face select and just make sure you've got it all selected. So all this, and then I'm going to click assign. And now finally I just need to grab this part here. So all these going round. Just make sure you've got it all, and then you're going to click assign with the top tile. So just click assign like that, and now that's looking, that will be much easier now when we come to actually add our materials. And if you just want to check to make sure they are assigned, you can actually click on the face and you'll see it jumps up to concrete. Click on this face and you'll see it comes to top tile. So you can just check to see if they're actually added the right way. So now what we need to do is we need to make this a tiny bit bigger just to make sure that this gap isn't here. We could go in and fix this manually, but I'd sooner just try and get them to join through the array actually. So let's press tab, and we just need to make this, like I say, a tiny bit bigger. So press S and X and just bring it out holding the shift button just a tiny bit like so. Press tab again and now you'll see they fit pretty well. And if we go around now and just check to make sure that you're happy with all the concrete in the middle of each tile, and click apply on the array modifier first, and then click apply on the curve modifier. Now if you press tab, you'll notice you've got the all turned into basically mesh, which is what you wanted. And now you can come up to UV editing, and now we can actually see that all these are actually laid out in the same place because we only UV unwrapped the first one, and as we made the array it copied every single UV on all these tiles. It's the best way of doing it. If you do it the other way, try and unwrap every single one of these to be the same, is a lot of work. So now let's press A, hovering over here, then you're going to come up to UV, you're going to click pack islands, and then we're going to come to this button here. And then you should have something which says rotate. Now this being ticked on means that Blender will actually rotate these. Now if you come to this and it doesn't open up, press Ctrl Z, go back to this. So I'll just actually do it because I think it's a little bit of a bug. So press Ctrl Z till you're back to this point again, then go to UV and pack islands just once more. Now if we tick this off, you'll notice that it turns them all the same way as what they were, because it doesn't try and rotate them to fit them into this UV space. So we definitely want this ticked off. So now let's bring in some materials, and then we can make these a bit bigger and exactly the same size as what we want. So let's come to shading, come over to materials, and let's start working our concrete first. So click on concrete, come to principled BSDF. Now you need to enable an add-on actually to make this much easier. Come over to edit, preferences, go to add-ons, which is here, and then let's put NODE, so node. And you're going to click this node wrangler on, click refresh, close that down. And now what we're going to do is we're going to bring in our first textures, and I've actually made a resource file for this tutorial. So go and download the resource file in the description below, and when you've downloaded it, come back and now we can start bringing in the textures. So let's press Ctrl-Shift-T, and now we're going to bring in our textures. So just go to the file wherever your resources are saved to. And the first one we're going to bring in is concrete, so let's double click that, and we're going to shift click each one of these, come over to where it says principled texture setup, and click on there. And you'll notice at the moment nothing happens. That's because we haven't got Eevee set on, so just click on Eevee. If it's on cycles, come over to this little box and change the render engine to Eevee, just like that. And you'll end up with something a little bit like this, which is clearly not correct to the moment. So now let's bring in our second texture. So come over back to materials, click on top tile, and again you'll end up with this setup. Ctrl Shift T, and now we're going to bring in our top tiles, which is this one here. Shift click all these, and again click this button, and now you're going to end up with something a little bit more as to what it should be. Also, they're looking a bit dark at the moment, so what we'll do now is we'll go back to modeling first, over here, and let's put it back on Eevee. Press tab so we can see what we're doing, double tap A, and now we'll press Shift A and we'll bring in a light, so we'll bring in a sun, and now we can see much better what we're actually doing. So we're going to put our sun over there, and we'll give it a little bit of direction. It's a bit boring pointing straight down, and it's not very realistic either. So press our X and pull it out, and then our Z, and let's just pull it to the side like this, till you're happy with the angle of it. And now we can see we can start work on our tiles, and they're already, you can see, looking a bit realistic. We just need to make them, as you can see if we zoom in, they're very blurred at the moment, and this is because the tiles are actually so small on the UV map. So let's go back finally to UV, tab again, so click on it, tab, and now let's make these bigger. Let's pull this over as well, and we'll put this on Eevee so we can see exactly what we're doing. And let's come over now to the UV map, press S, and just make them a lot bigger till you're happy with the resolution. And now when you zoom in, you can notice that the actual resolution of these is looking much better. Double tap A, and now you can make out exactly what your tiles are going to look like going around your pool. And I think I might make mine just a little bit bigger as well, so let's bring them out even more. I'm just looking at my concrete, I just want that to look a bit more real, and I think from this instance I'm very happy with that. And you'll notice that I've got a slight shine on this material as well, which is what we need for tiles. So finally let's come back to modeling, and I think we've finished with the top tiles, so now we can start work on these bottom tiles going down. Okay, so let's now click on our curve once more, and we'll come up to object and convert to mesh from curve. Click on this one here, and now when you press tab, press A and click on the nodes, you'll be able to see that this curve now has been turned into a piece of mesh. And obviously we don't want this many nodes, this is far too many, so press delete and put limited dissolve, and that's going to give you a much cleaner, smaller polygon mesh to actually work with. And now what we'll do is we'll create our basin for our pool. So what we first need to do is come over to vert select, so select vert select, and now what we can do is we can press E, and you can see that we can pull it down, Z, and what you're going to do is you're going to make this deep enough for your liking, basically, of your pool. I don't want it actually too deep, something like that should be fine, maybe a little bit deeper, so I'll press shift space, bring in my move tool, I'll move it down just a tiny bit, and I'll also place my tiles on top of it, just so they're just above the pool surface. And now what I'm going to do is, before I put bottom on this, actually I want to create a second part of this, and the reason for that is because we need some concrete coming slightly down here going towards our ground, to be as realistic as possible. So let's actually come over to our spanner again, add modifier, solidify, and what we'll do is we'll drag this out just to the edge of here, and you can go underneath and check to see what it looks like. And so I can see the inside of the tiles is going to be here, and the outside of the concrete is going to be around here somewhere. So I think I'm happy with that. When you're happy with it, just click apply, and we have to be in object mode, and then we'll just hide these tiles, click back on this, and now we'll come to face select, and we'll grab all these faces, press delete, faces, come underneath and do the same thing underneath. So delete, faces, and you should be left with something like this, which is exactly what we want. And now let's start adding the bottom of our pool in. So if we come over to one of these edges like this, and what we'll do is we'll grab 3 of the edges, and if you're zooming in and it won't zoom in anymore, just press the dot button on your number pad, that'll zoom you right in. Press the F button, and that'll fill that face there, and then you just need to grab this vert on the face that you just filled in, and now if you press F repeatedly, what will happen is it'll start to fill this pool in very nicely for you, as you can see. So let's fill it all in, and there you go. Now, it's a very easy way of actually filling things in, doing that technique. So let's now grab these verts going all along the bottom, just to split it off from this part here. And just make sure you've got them all. I've got one missing there, look. And Ctrl E and mark seam. So we've got our seams already marked out. And finally, the last thing I want to do is I want to press Tab. I want to right click and I want to shade smooth. And obviously you can see at the moment this is not correct. So what we need to do is come over to your little triangle over here, click on normals and click auto smooth. And you can see now it's smoothed off pretty nicely. Just have a check round just to make sure you're happy with it. And I think I am. Now what we need to do is we just need to go in and mark 2 more seams. So I'm looking for a seam where I can mark it where's the least place to be seen, because this point here obviously needs a seam marking so we can actually unwrap it and it unwraps correctly. So let's mark a seam here and we'll mark a seam here. So that's doing the inside and the outside. So Ctrl E once more, mark seam, and now we can actually start unwrapping this. So if we press Tab, Ctrl A, rotation and scale, Tab again, A, U for unwrap, and now let's go into our UV editing and see how that's unwraps. So this is what we've got at the moment, and just make sure that they're the same scale as each other. So go to UV and average island scale. Now when you click this, if they're not the same scale, it will put them the same scale as long as you've got everything selected with the A button. Okay, so now let's bring in our next material. So we'll go to shading once more and we'll bring in, so make sure you're on material, click new, and let's click bottom tiles. So bottom tile, and now we'll come into our principled again. Let's drag that over there, Control Shift T, and now we'll find our bottom tiles, which are these ones here, and click with shift click and then click principled, and then you'll end up with something like that, which you can see are far too big at the moment. So back to UV editing, and all we need to do now is zoom out, and we need to just make these much bigger so you're happy with the size. Now you can press Tab, Alt H, and bring your tiles back in, and now you're just looking to see if you're happy with the size of these tiles. I think I'll make mine a little bit bigger, so S again. And you'll also notice that the bottom of the pole lines up perfectly because we made these exactly the same scale. So under here, when we did average island scale, this made them the same size. And now I'm just looking to see where that join is. So if I press Tab, you can see a very slight join. And if you want to, you can make them a little tiny bigger, holding the shift button down just to bring them so that seam look now is right next to this mark here. So it makes it very hard to see. And I might make it just a little tiny bit smaller. And now you can't see anything at all when we press the Tab. Very hard to see. Now obviously the outside of this needs to also be concrete. So what we'll do is now we've unwrapped them, I'll grab just the outside. So I'll come to face select and click on this face, press the L button, and I'll just pull this over. Go back to materials and I'll add in a new material, and then I'll click on this button here and I'll bring in my concrete, and then I'll click assign. And now I'm looking for is to make sure that this is the right resolution. So press Tab and I can see it's absolutely not, so let's make it much bigger, and there we can see that's looking much better. Might even be able to get away with something even bigger, and that's looking more like concrete now, and more or less like the top of the tiles as well. So let's go back now to modeling, double tap A, and now you can have a look around and see if you're happy with the beginnings of your pool. Okay, so the next thing we need to do now is need our ground plane on the outside. So what we'll do is we'll press Shift A and we'll bring in a plane. So let's bring in a plane like so, press the S button, and now let's get it the right size because we don't want it to be too huge. I mean, it's just a tutorial just to show you. So I'll make it something like this, and I'll bring it in a little bit just so I can get a nice picture of it actually. So press 7 now, Tab button, and what you're going to do is you're going to press the K button, and that'll bring in the knife tool. So start somewhere over here. Now when you've made your first cut, so make your first cut in the edge somewhere like here. You can actually move with the shift and the middle mouse button to move left and right, but if you move this way you'll find that you can't actually cut it out correctly. So I'll just restart that again. So 7 on the number pad to go over the top, and let's also go in wireframe, and that's going to make it much easier for us. So Z, wireframe, and now you can see exactly where you want to be cutting out. You want to be cutting out basically in between these actual tiles where the tiles and the concrete are separated. So okay, once more, let's come over to our edge, and I'll start somewhere around here. And it doesn't matter too much about how jagged this edge is, because nobody's going to see it. So all you just need to make sure you do is that you cut in and you keep your cut in between, as I say, the concrete and the tiles. So let's keep going all the way back round to the start, and basically then all you need to do is click on the start one that you actually created. So click this one there, press enter button, and now what you're going to do is you're going to remove the faces from the middle. So face select, click on this face, and you'll see a little dot here. Click on this face with shift, delete, and click on faces, and then you should be left with something like this. Now we can actually bring this up, so let's go back to solid now. So I'm just going to press Z, solid, and now I can click on just this plane here, and I'll just bring it up just a little bit so I can see what I'm actually doing. Press the tab button, and now we can see we're left with something like this. Now you can see that this at the moment is not correct. There's so many sides going into one polygon, so we need to fix that. So let's first of all grab this face and this face, press delete, only faces, and now we'll just delete these edges here. So invert select, select this edge, and where's my other edge, and this edge, delete, and we're going to click delete edges just like that. Now when we come to join in fact we've got two joins there, so I'll actually get rid of that. So click on this edge and this edge, press delete, and we're going to limited dissolve, and that will make it one edge again. So now we've got these four edges. Now when we come to join these up, so we're joining these up to these, there's only one edge here, and if I like grab this and I press Ctrl E and bridge edge loops, you'll see that they all go into one point, and that's not a good thing. The reason for that is the more verts that go into one point, the harder it is to light, the harder it is to animate, the harder it is to subdivide, and all those things actually get messed up. So you're much better off keeping the amount of verts that go into one point down to 4 or less. Now how do we do that on this? Well, what we do is we'll press Ctrl Z first. I'll come along and I'll click all these edges. I'll right click and I'll subdivide, and now you'll see that we've got two edges here now, and that makes a lot less points going in. I'm going to subdivide it a few more times though, so I'm going to subdivide and subdivide once more, and now you'll see we've got many edges for these to go into. So let's grab the outside, grab the inside, right click and bridge edge loops, and now you'll see you've got a much nicer piece of mesh. We have got some points where 3 are going into them, but most, and 4 here for instance, but most of them are just 2. So that's much better than how we had it before. So let's now bring this down, and we're going to drop this down just below these tiles so we can see a little bit of concrete as it would be in real life. And now we're going to add a material, so let's press tab and let's click new, and we'll call this grass, and we're going to actually add 2 lots of textures within the same material on this one. So let's come to shading, click on principled, Ctrl Shift T, and the first one we're going to bring in is our grass. So let's shift click all these, principled texture setup, and you'll see you'll end up with something like this, which doesn't look correct. Actually we should UV unwrap it first, so I'll press Ctrl A, rotation and scale, tab, U, and unwrap, and now we can see we've got something much more that looks like grass, and we'll sort out the resolution in a minute. So first of all though, let's grab our principled, Shift D, drag it up, and now Ctrl Shift T, and we'll bring in now our soil as well. So bringing in these like so, click on the principled texture setup, and now we've got something like this. Let's bring our material over here like so, and what I need to do is now I need to bring in 2 mix shaders, one for the displacement and one for the materials. So what I'll do is I'll press Shift A and I'll bring in shader, and it's going to be a mix shader, so I'm going to bring that there, and then I'm just going to copy this, Shift D. So let's first of all bring in our first one, which will be the color of each one. So let's drag this one up as well, to where it needs to go, which is into this point here. And if you can't see it, just drag it up a little bit and then you can zoom in a little bit more. So let's grab this one, drop it in there, and then I can pull this out, and now I can put this part here into my surface. And you'll end up with something like this. And basically what you're doing here, you're making sure some rocks can come through and make the ground just look a little bit more uneven. So now let's go to our displacement, which is this one down here. I'm just going to pull this along here, and I'm going to pull this one along here. So I've got my mix shader, and now let's pull this one into the top one of here and this into the bottom one. Oops. And now let's unplug this and plug this in, and there you've got your displacement as well, which gives it a bit more life to the grass. And it might be a bit too much. What we're going to do is first, though, we're going to go to UV editing, and the first thing we're going to do is grab our mesh, and let's make it a bit bigger, and let's press tab, and now we can get some idea of how that's going to look. There's maybe a little bit too many rocks poking through here, so we'll probably turn those down as well in the end. Let me just make this a little bit bigger and have a look what that looks like. Yeah, and that's actually looking a little bit better actually. So let's go back to our shading now. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn the mix shader on this one, which is the colors of our two textures. And if we turn this down, you'll see that we can bring in more rocks or less rocks. So we'll just bring that down just a little bit so there's less actual rocks. Press tab button again, and now you can see it's starting to look much better, and it is looking a bit flat. So now let's go to modeling, press tab, and let's have a look what we've got so far. And what we need to do now is we need to bring in another modifier, and we'll bring in displace. But first, let's just set the origin to geometry. That puts it bang in the middle. Come over to your spanner again, add modifier, click on displace, and it'll move it up like that, and just expect that. Come over to this checkered flag here, and this is where we can add in our type of noise where we're going to displace it off. You can bring in a texture of your own to displace it, but I'm just going to use one that's inbuilt within Blender. So let's come down to noise, and we'll click on there, and that'll bring in something like this. And clearly not right. Clearly the noise and the displacement on this is far too high. So come back across to your spanner, and here you can turn down the level of displacement. So if you turn it down even to 0.1, you'll see that that's probably a little bit too high. So let's just turn it down to something like 0.05, something like that. And now you'll notice that that's displaced much more realistic than what we had before. Press double tap the A, and now you can have a look at your lawn and make sure that you're actually happy with it. Obviously, if you were doing this for a scene or something like this, you'd probably have little tufts of grass and things like that, which would cover this lawn, things like rocks. But this would be mainly your basis for your lawn to your swimming pool. So let's now click apply, and that's what we're left with. And now the last thing we need to do is, of course, we need to bring in our water. So what we'll do is we'll click on the actual pool inside and press tab. And we've got these selected. We don't want these selected, so come to face, select a face, press L, and you're left with this. Shift D, enter, and let's pull this up. And we should have something like this. We're going to press P to separate it from the other part of the pool. Selection, click on it again. Let's go in, and let's go to our material first, and we'll just delete both of these materials by pressing this minus key here. And finally, I want to bring it down a little bit, and I'll set the origin, so origin to geometry, and I'll bring it down to something like that. And now all I'm trying to do is just bring it out a little bit, just so it's slightly bigger than our pool. So SX and SY, and that'll make it slightly bigger, like so. You can go over the top as well, press Z button, go into wireframe, and now you can make sure that it's in the middle, kind of all these things. And I can see that I can actually bring it a bit more on the x-axis, so let's bring it out a little bit more. And I'm looking now to make sure that I'm happy where this is placed. So I'm just going to move it over just a little bit. I don't want it going past the concrete point, of course, so I know that I need to bring it in on these edges. So what I'm going to do now is press tab, and I'm actually going to come up to proportional editing, onto vert select, and now I can grab my pull and I can start bringing these just in just a little bit, just to make sure that it's fitting nice within the pots that I need it. So I can see around here it's about in the middle, and I can see I need to really pull it out on here. And this doesn't matter actually how sharp the edges are, as long as they're within the boundaries of the concrete and tiles. We don't want water hanging over. So let's bring this out just a little bit more, and this one here, and I think that's about right. So now I'll just press Z once more, go into solid, and now I'm just going to have a look, see if my water's actually poking out anywhere, and I don't see it poking out anywhere, and that looks about right to me. So let's put it back on EV, and let's add in our final material, which is the water. So make sure you've got your water clicked on, come over to materials, press the plus button, and we're not actually going to use any textures on this water. We're going to create it purely from nodes. Let's click new, double tap this, and put water, and we're going to change this surface to diffuse. So let's put it on like that, and you'll end up with something like this. Right click, let's just shade smooth, and have we unwrapped it? I think it's already unwrapped. Let me just check that. So tap A, and yeah, it's already unwrapped. Doesn't need to be over there, that's pretty more in the middle. And I'll also take off proportional editing, and now I can finally go into my shader, and let me find my diffuse, which is over here, and I'm going to drag this diffuse and put it all the way over here, and I'm going to add now a mix shader. So shift A, come to shader and click mix shader, and now we'll add in another mix shader. So shift A, shader, mix shader, plug that one in there, and we just need to cross these two over for now. So drag this point, put it in the bottom, and pull it out of the top. And now we're going to add in a glossy. So shift A and shader, glossy, let's put that one there, and we're going to plug that one straight into there. And at the moment you'll see nothing happens, but we do need to do a couple of things with the options over here. So let's come over to screen space refraction, click that on. Then let's come up to this little TV here again, and we're going to come over to screen space reflection, tick that on, pull the box down and put in refraction, and you should end up with nothing happening again because we just need to add a few more nodes. So now those nodes are added, let's come in and add a Fresnel. So shift A and come to search, FRE, and you'll see Fresnel. Let's put that there, and let's plug this FAC of the Fresnel into our first mix shader like so. And now let's add another shader. So shift A again, and this time we're going to add in a glass shader. So let's put that there, and let's plug this one now into the top of our other shader like so. And now I'm going to set this to 0.050. And also now what I need to do is I need to change now the IOR on the Fresnel and the IOR on the glass. Now water generally has an IOR of 1.333. So let's change those. So 1.123, and let's change the IOR on this, on the glass, and you should end up with something that's a little bit like that. It doesn't look too good at the moment. So now let's add in another shader. So we'll add in a transparent. Let's put that there, and we'll just copy this one over. So this mix shader, shift D, drag it, put it in there, and we'll change this now to 0.267. Now this shader here, as long as you remember, controls how see-through the water will actually be. So if I plug in this now, so plug in my shader. Now these shaders here will control how see-through the actual water is, but we won't mess around with those yet. We'll mess around and fine-tune those once we've actually got our other shader in. And also this one over here, this diffuse, controls what color the water is. So I'll show you that in a minute. So first of all, let's finish off this shader. So the first one we're going to bring in is something called a Musgrave. So go to search and put in MUS and Musgrave texture. Let's bring that in there, and then shift D, copy that over. And now what we're going to do is press shift A, and you're going to put in search mix, MIX, and it's going to be a mixed RGB, and you'll end up with something like this. So let's go to our first Musgrave, and we're going to put this at 142, and we're going to put the detail at 0.6. Now this Musgrave basically makes noise and displaces this material to make it look like waves within the water. So let's come to our other one, 37.6 and 1.9. And it doesn't matter because you're going to have to mess around with these, because depending on how big your pool is, you need to change these anyway to get just the right ripples in the water. So let's plug them in and have a look what that looks like. So let's plug this into the colour, this one into the top colour, and finally this colour goes into the displacement, and you'll end up with something like that. And you can see at the moment that we have got some visibility going down, but not a lot. And we do have control actually over this shader now. So, and also this shader can be used both in Eevee and in cycles. So for instance, if these waves are a bit too much, a bit too many ripples for you, just come across and you can turn this up or you can turn it down just to make them more or less. So have a look and something when you're happy with it. So I think I'm a bit happier with that. And now let's come across, and I think we'll make our water just a little bit more blue. So if I come over here, you can see this is where I turn this down. This will actually colour the water. So I think I'll put it something a little bit, little tiny bit blue, not that blue, something like that. And that's looking much better. So as you can see, this will be your Eevee render. And if you want to do it on cycles, which I'm going to do, so if I go into render engine, and on this this little TV here and click this on cycles, it takes a bit longer to load up, and you'll see it's not quite right for these cycles. So all we need to do for the cycles is we actually just need to turn this down just a slight bit, just to make sure that it's see-through but not too see-through, so we can just see through there. Let's have a closer look. So now you can see with this water you've actually got the choice of which one you actually want to use. So I think I'll bring it up just a little bit more. It's a bit too see-through. Oops, a little bit the other way, sorry. It's a little bit too see-through at the moment. I just want it very, very, very slight. And of course you can play around with this and to your heart's content and set up exactly how you want it. So now finally let's go to modeling, and I will show you, just in case you don't know, let's put it back on cycles, tab, and double tap A. And I think actually for working with this, I'll actually come over to my TV again and I'll put it on Eevee because it's much faster to work with. So you can see it's looking very nice at the moment. So what we'll do now is we'll add a camera. So Shift A, come to camera. Your camera will be somewhere over there, don't worry about that. Open up this button, and the first thing you want to do is come to view. Now press the 0 button on your number pad, and you'll see your camera comes like this. Zoom forward just a little bit, and what we're doing is we're trying to set our camera to the outside of here, so we don't want it right there. We want to see exactly what we're taking an image of. So I'll set it to something like that, then I'll click lock camera to view, and I can actually zoom out now, and the camera will follow me exactly where I'm going. So let me set my perfect kind of image of it. So I'll think something like that. And if you want to zoom in slower, just hold the Control Shift button, press your middle mouse at the same time, and just move it up and down, and you'll see you can move in slower or faster like that. And I think I'm happy with that. So now what I'll do is I'll come and take this off of lock camera to view, press the middle button outside of here, and now I can freely move around. My camera's set up in the perfect position. Let's close this down with the end button, and finally now let's take a render of this. So in Eevee, all I have to do is press F12, and of course with something like this you're going to bring in an HDRI, which is the background image or something like that. Let me zoom out a little bit, and there's the image of your pool. Now we can take one also with cycles, so we'll switch this to cycles, and again we'll press F12. I'm not going to take a detailed render just to show you, so I'm just going to put it on something like 30, press F12, and now you'll see we'll start actually making an image for cycles. So I'll be back when this is done, guys. So this is the image with cycles. You can see we've got a little bit of shading issues here, and that's just because our our displacement's a little bit too high, so we just need to bring that down a little bit. But you can see you can get a pretty good result just like this. So all we'd need to do is finally come over to our world, and we'll set the color down to something much lighter, like so. Then what we'll do is we'll come across to our grass, press the tab button, and you can see we end up with something like this. And all we need to do is basically, you can see that these vertices just need smoothing out a little bit. So I'll come over to vertex and smooth vertices, and that'll get rid of that that shading issue that you had there. And so finally I can render it out now, and you can see you've got a very good example of a pole. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you want to support the channel, then check out the links below. You can purchase my online full courses. I now teach over 15,000 students. And also down below you'll find in the description free links to Skillshare and free links also to my courses. You'll also find at the bottom of the description the resource pack for this tutorial. So thanks a lot everyone, happy modeling, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.